Good evening. There are certain specific principles which constitute the major principles of the message of the infinite way. As I have indicated before, we will not use terms like right or wrong, but we will use, or rather reveal, that there are differences of approach, and that each teaching or each teacher presents that approach as it has been revealed to him or to her, and as it has found fruitage. The very first of these principles deals with the subject of the nature of God. As I've explained to you, to know God aright is life eternal. Now, there is no demonstration to make beyond that of eternal life. Once we have accomplished immortality, once we have accomplished eternal life, we have accomplished it all. And we can accomplish it all in only one way. That is, to know Him aright. Now, in this unfoldment of the infinite way, you find a presentation of the nature of God that at first is difficult to accept unless something within you instantly responds to it. Because the nature of God as it is seen in this work is such that it makes it unnecessary to pray to God for anything. It makes it unnecessary to turn to God for anything. It makes it unnecessary to concern oneself unnecessarily, unduly, about bringing God to one's experience, because it soon becomes apparent that it isn't possible to achieve. It isn't possible to bring God to one's experience. Regardless of how much we may use terminology that might indicate that there is a way to bring God to our experience, actually, there is a way in which we can bring ourselves to God. That, of course, is our function in this work. Not bringing God to us, but bringing ourselves to God. Not trying to get God to do our will, but surrendering our will, that we may accept God's will in our experience. Not only accept it, but come to know what it is and submit ourselves to it. In other words, it involves, first of all, accepting God as the infinite intelligence of the entire universe, not only of this planet, but of all other planets as well. Not only of this world, but all other worlds as well. And in accepting God as the supreme intelligence, it means relaxing and not attempting to tell God, advise God, acquaint God with our needs, but rather to at all times open our consciousness that we may receive impartations of God's will God's law, God's life. This has to do, of course, with the revelation that perhaps started the infinite way into expression. Humanhood, at any level, consists of good and of evil experiences. Sick and well, poor and rich, up and down, high and low. And the ordinary human experience, even of a religious nature, is usually intended only to change the bad into the good. That is, to change a sinner into a good human, or to change a sick human into a well human, or an unemployed human into an employed human, and a lacking human into one who has abundance. This was never the goal of the infinite way. This was never its purpose, and is further removed from that now than ever. And this is the reason. In our true being, our true identity is spiritual identity, or Christhood. That means we are spiritual sons of God. In Christian mysticism, this is called Christ. That is, we are Christed, or we are the Christ of God, or we are the Son of God. In Oriental mysticism, there is the same revelation, but we are then referred to as Buddhi, or the Buddha man, or the mind of Buddha, or having the mind of Buddha. The word Buddha, like the word Christ, means enlightened, the enlightened one. And as Jesus is the Christ, that is, Jesus is the enlightened one, so Gautama is the Buddha. Notice that in ancient literature we don't read of Jesus Christ, but Jesus the Christ. And before that, we don't read of Gautama Buddha, but Gautama the Buddha. And in both cases it means the name and then the enlightened one. Now, in Oriental mysticism, it is revealed that any and every individual may attain that spiritual enlightenment. That is, they may attain Buddhahood. For this reason, in the Oriental religions, there are literally hundreds of Buddhas. Not all at the same high level of Gautama the Buddha, but nevertheless different states and stages of Buddhahood. In Christian mysticism, that was also the truth until the organization of the church. Because before that, we had Moses, and we had Elijah and Isaiah, and there are quite a few in between that period and Jesus. And then there is Jesus and John and Paul. All of these have in some measure received enlightenment. But with the organization of the church, this is done away with, and supposedly there is only one individual of all time who is enlightened. Of course, that can never be, and you know it. God is no respecter of persons, and God's grace is available to those who seek it, to those who will endure the The way, of course, is straight and narrow, and few there be that enter, but there is that way. In fact, the entire mission of the Master was to reveal to us that way, the way in which we could attain enlightenment. Had he come to set up the worship of an individual as something which we could not attain, he never would have taught about your father and my father. He never would have sent the disciples out to do the works that he did. He never would have said, greater works shall ye do. But actually, as you study his ministry, you will know that he was literally the way shower, showing us the way. The way to what? To attain enlightenment. Now, this spiritual Son of God is our true identity, and in some measure we attain a conscious awareness of it and the demonstration of it if we follow the way that was shown us. In seeking this way, then, it must be remembered that we are not seeking loaves and fishes. You remember the rebuke that the Master gave to those whom he fed, and who followed him across the lake the next day to be fed again. And he said, I fed you yesterday. I showed you the miracle yesterday. I showed you how to attain this, but now you seek me for loaves and fishes, not for the principle, not for the way, just for the loaves and fishes. So it is that those who embark on a spiritual path, while it is natural that on their way the sins, the diseases, and the lacks of human experience will dissolve and fade out, will disappear, that is not the ultimate purpose of our being on the spiritual path, for the ultimate purpose is attaining our Christhood, attaining conscious realization of our sonship. Now, let us remember then that at every step of the way, our purpose is not merely being healed, although that is a rightful desire, not merely being enriched, that is a rightful desire, for it is right that we enjoy the abundance, the fullness of the Godhead bodily. It is right that we enjoy the complete health, not merely a physical health, which ends at 60 years and 10, 12, 20, but spiritual health, which is life eternal, which means the attainment of immortality. Now, in following the Master, we learn that we are to become sons of God. If Paul rightly understood the Master, he said this to us when he said that as creatures we are not under the law of God, neither indeed can be and cannot please God. But if so be the Spirit of God dwell in you, then do you become the children of God. Now, it has been the habit of many, many metaphysical students to walk around declaring that they are children of God, at the same time indulging the sins and the diseases and the evils of humanness. And they thereby believe that by declaring they are sons of God, that in some miraculous fashion they are going to bring it about. This isn't true. It is far better to realize that until the Spirit of God dwells in me, until I consciously become aware of God's presence, that I'm not even under the law of God, and that is why I'm subject to accident, disease, infection, contagion, lack, limitation. And therefore, there is a need that I make haste and become acquainted with myself, learn of my true identity, learn to abide in God, and let God abide in me. Now, in approaching this subject of the nature of God and coming to know God aright, first of all, be assured that God is divine intelligence, the infinite wisdom of this universe, and therefore that God knows all. Therefore, there is no need for us to tell God or ask God. Next, please realize that the nature of God is divine love. And therefore, since as divine mind God knows your need, as divine love it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And then remember that he said how it was to be done: by seeking first the kingdom of God, by seeking first the awareness of God, the realm of God. Then all of these things will be added unto you, because your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things, and it is his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And this releases you from mental strain. It releases you from the fear that God doesn't know you, doesn't know your need, and perhaps that it isn't his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. This releases you from concern and enables you to relax and to rest in God's care. You separate yourself from God's care through fear, worry, doubt, because you set up a barrier, and through this the grace of God does not reach you, even though it is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. Relax and watch how the grace of God enfolds you, how it feeds you, sustains you, maintains you, how it fills your entire being with its grace as you relax. God is. And God is closer than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. And all that God is, I am. And all that the Father hath is mine. I am in God, and God is in me. And you see, this realization is the complete relaxing from mental power, and it enables spiritual presence to operate as grace in your consciousness. Now, I'm touching on this briefly because you have all of the writings in which to find the entire exposition of God, the nature of God, and the way of bringing yourself into conscious oneness with God and God's grace. Therefore, I will pass to the next subject, which constitutes the second principle of the infinite way. And this one, incidentally, will require study and practice, because it is not a part of any other religious teaching on the face of the globe of which I have ever read. Therefore, while at first you may answer that everyone knows this, and you surely do, be assured everyone doesn't, and you don't, unless you have studied it and practiced it to the point of realization. And this explains to you why in our work it is not necessary to concern ourselves about getting God's help, but it will show you why, since God functions as God, that is all of God's help that you need. And you do not need the help of God for these problems. What you need for these problems is to know the truth. And this is the truth about those problems. When Mrs. Eddy gave Christian Science to the world, she gave with it a list containing the causes of disease. Most of you are probably familiar with that list, since it has been perpetuated not only in metaphysical teachings but also in some medical teachings now. It had such things as worry causes ulcers, hate and jealousy causes cancer, other human qualities cause rheumatism, etc., etc. Now, after Mrs. Eddy made the discovery of spiritual wisdom, she also discovered that that list was incorrect and had no basis in fact. And she recalled that list from her students, asked them all to return them to her, that in her practice she had found that this was an erroneous practice, and most students did return them. One very prominent one refused to return it, and he thereby lost his demonstration and that of his students, because the list wasn't correct. And worry does not cause ulcers, and hate and jealousy does not cause cancer, and resentment does not cause rheumatism, or whatever it is that that list says it does. And all those who have dedicated themselves to that list either have gone out of business or have grown spiritually beyond them. One or the other thing is necessary. Either, if you cling to that list, it will force you out of the metaphysical world, or if you grow spiritually, you will grow above it and throw it away. The reason is this: these are not the causes of disease, and they never were. Whatever it is that causes worry may cause ulcers. Whatever it is that causes one to hate may cause cancer. Whatever it is that causes one to fear may produce tension and disease. But believe me, it isn't any of the things that are on those lists. Now, you have been bearing witness to something of a miracle. In the activity of this infinite way. May I briefly tell you that in 13 years, this message has spread to 5 continents, that its writings have found publishers in the United States and England, Holland, Germany, now going into France and Japan, and that it has done this without an organization, without a membership, without promotion, without advertising. It has done this on whatever seed of truth is within the message itself. This activity of the Infinite Way never had money to promote it, never had influence, didn't even have a publisher that could sell its writings. And yet, it has developed all of these things for itself from the seed within itself, and that seed is this. It was revealed to me in 1932. What is the cause of disease? What is the cause of lack and limitation? What is the cause of our troubles? And because we know the cause, we know the remedy. Because we know the cause, we know the nature of the effect and what to do about it. And it has been that secret, a very open secret. It's published in every one of the writings and in every one of the pamphlets and in every one of the monthly letters and in the magazine articles that are published in magazines almost monthly in the United States, England, India, and Australia, and beginning this year in Germany. It's an open secret, and it deals with the subject that we know as the nature of error. And it is the understanding of the nature of error that makes it possible for these healing works to be accomplished, because it doesn't take any power, physical power or mental power, to dissolve a mirage. One has only to know that it is mirage and why it is mirage, and the mirage dissolves itself. It doesn't take physical might or mental power to do healing work, because the nature of disease is such that it can't be fought, and it can't be overcome, and it can't be destroyed. It can only be understood. It isn't much different than going down to the desert in a car for the first time and beholding that water on the road ahead of one, and in one's ignorance of the nature of that water, stopping the car, probably waiting for someone to come along and drain the water off, until someone does come along who has been to the desert before and says, "Drive on, that isn't water, that is a mirage." And with a sigh of relief, one drives on and finds it literally true. There is no water there. Let us now take up the subject of the nature of error from its start. And let me tell you that the reason ulcers aren't caused by worry, and cancers aren't caused by hate or jealousy or any other thing, resentment, is this: error is not personal, and it does not have its beginning in you. And if you do not find the error before it reaches you, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to shovel all those tons of water out of you which aren't there. All of the errors and evils which aren't there. Evil is not personal, it is impersonal. You are not evil. It is true, you may hate, you may steal, you may commit adultery, you may murder, but it isn't you. Paul described it accurately when he said, "I find no sin in me, but a sense of sin remains." I'm not the sinner. A sense of sin. This begins before me and outside of me. The very first principle of healing that was ever revealed to me was this: never say you to a patient, never say you are spiritual, and never say you must be more loving, more just, more kind, more moral. Never say he, she, or it of a patient. Never say he should do this. Don't even say you must read 12 pages every day. Don't even say you must go to church. For the truth is that already Christ is your true identity, and you are spiritual. There is nothing you can do about it except know this truth and let this truth make you free, that now are we the sons of God. And what about this appearance of evil? This appearance of sin, of disease, of lack, of limitation, of unemployment, of nasty disposition, miserliness, or profligacy? What of it? It is impersonal. And the very moment that you declare it to be impersonal, you begin to separate it from yourself. You take the condemnation from your own shoulders, much as the Master did when he said to the woman taken in adultery, "Neither do I condemn thee." And can't you imagine how her face must have lit up? Can you imagine the condemnation she was holding herself in believing that she was an adulteress, she was a sinner, she was a criminal, and here is a man who really knows our highest spiritual light saying, "Neither do I condemn thee." Oh, I have felt it myself when I have felt my own human errors, the human nature that would work in me and in the past has worked to a greater extent than it dare work now. When I have realized, wait a minute, no condemnation, no self-condemnation. Remember your true identity, and this that's bothering you is of the earth, earthy. It was here before you were born, and it probably will afflict somebody not yet born, unless their parents know enough how to bring them into this world as a spiritual being and never hold them in condemnation. You will begin to perceive how this law operates, this principle, if you yourself have any problems of human relationships, that is, marital discords or parental or filial, or discords in your office, in your business, or with your neighbors. If you will begin to work with the chapter Love Thy Neighbor in the book Practicing the Presence, and the chapter Relationship of Oneness in the Art of Spiritual Healing, and the little pamphlet Love and Gratitude, with these you will find how you will release your enemies. I just use the word enemies as meaning opponents or opposition. You will release them through the understanding of the principles in those writings, and you will have to release yourself, because you'll say, well, if I have to call John Jones spiritual, I'm sure then that I'm at least as spiritual as he or she. And that will bring a measure of release, because it will take from you all sense of condemnation. And so, the first principle of healing is this: when your patient, your relative, your friend asks for help, be sure that you see the claim as completely impersonal, as having its origin outside of that individual. We can do that simply by inventing a name for that impersonal source of error. It was a really great mystic who invented the name devil. For originally, the word devil meant the impersonal source of evil. In other words, it meant the tempter. That isn't you, remember. That's the tempter that tempts you into sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation. And to this tempter was given the name devil so that it could be recognized at all times as an impersonal source of evil. If you will bear with me a moment as we watch the Master, Christ Jesus, on the mountaintop in the wilderness, as the devil stands in front of him and tempts him. Picture that now within your own mind. For that is the way it is given to us in Scripture. The devil tempted him. But he recognized the devil, the impersonal tempter or source of evil, and he merely said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And Satan stopped momentarily. Then he thought up something else. And again, the devil, Satan, the tempter, tempts the Master with still another wonderful object. To which the Master replies, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And of course, again, the devil has a new gadget. To which the Master also replies, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And now, what do we hear about the Satan ever since then, as far as the Master is concerned? He doesn't appear anymore, does he? He seems to have faded out. Right there and then, on that third, "Get thee behind me, Satan," Satan is no more. The tempter is gone, the temptation is gone. The Master is alone, victor, alone with God, consciously one with God, with full dominion. But the tempter, the devil, he's gone. So will you find that when called upon for help, and even if it should be someone 95 years of age saying they're suffering from old age, don't accept that either. Remember, that is not personal. This claim of age has to do with a calendar. Believe it or not, they make new ones every year. You'd think they'd wake up sometime or other and stop it and say, "We're making our own tombstone with those things." But it's impersonal. The calendar isn't personal. It doesn't mean to harm you. It harms you because you accept it. You keep looking at it every day and wondering what story it tells, instead of saying, "Get thee behind me, Satan," and proving how impersonal a calendar can be. Now, as temptation comes to you, remember this. Temptation will come in the form of a person, or a disease, or a sin, or a lack. It won't come in the form of a man with cloven hoofs that you can identify. Sometimes it comes in the guise of good. You must be alert to recognize that sometimes good is as much evil as evil itself. But this will not concern you or fool you once you have learned to impersonalize every phase of discord, so that you don't go to the individual and say, "Now let's see what this is in you that's causing it." Perhaps you know that a few years ago, Dr. Menninger, the greatest name in psychology, said on a national broadcast, "We have never yet healed a disease, but we know we're on the right track." Perhaps you know that last month in New York, a committee of psychiatrists admitted that they had never witnessed a healing through psychiatry and didn't know a psychiatrist who had. And do you know why? Because they're looking for the evil in you. They're making you admit it. It isn't there. It never was. They can't find it there. No wonder they can't have a healing. Please know this. If you wish to see harmony in your life, stop blaming yourself for your troubles and be just as sure that you stop blaming your neighbor or your parents or your husband or your wife or your child, because it isn't their fault. The fault lies in an impersonal source which had its beginning in the experience that is called eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's where it all has its beginning. Anyone can begin to demonstrate harmony in their experience in proportion as they will give up the temptation to talk about good and evil. This is good and this is evil. In proportion as they will begin to realize that in a God-created universe there can neither be good nor evil, there can only be God, Spirit. Do you want to understand that? Well, let us say 2 times 2 are 4. And then let me say that this isn't good, this is just true. It's neither good nor evil that 2 times 2 are 4, it's just true. Carnations must come from carnation bushes, carnation seeds. Why? There's a law of like begetting like. That isn't good, that's just true, it's natural, it's right. It's the way it is spiritually ordained that like begets like. It's neither good nor bad, it's just, it is so. You look at roses and in most cases, oh, how beautiful, oh, how wonderful, oh, how gorgeous, oh, how good. And here's somebody else suffering from rose fever saying, get them away. And the truth is they are neither good nor evil. They are roses. And a rose is a rose is a rose is a rose, and it is a rose. And that's what it is, a rose. And the fact that we appreciate it or love it, enjoy it, doesn't mean that it is good. It means that we have a good sense of it. Do you think for a moment that this flower is red? Well, of course, those of you who know that there's no color at all in this flower. It can't be. The flower is, the color is in you. And you are ascribing the color red to this, and if there's a colorblind person here, they may be seeing it as green. Why? If it were red, they would see it as red, but it isn't red. These are only light vibrations. They have no color until they strike your eye. And then your eye creates the color. It is the same with sound. There is no sound coming out of my mouth. There are only waves, air waves. It becomes sound when it strikes your eardrum. Is this good or evil? No, this is a fact. This is just a fact. And as you realize this, you will learn that everything in this world is God ordained. That's not good or bad, it just is so. It is beautifully so. Now, when you are presented with these appearances, let us call these appearances, these temptations of the devil, since in our mind now there is a connotation of devil that makes it almost impossible for us to use the word, because devil has come to be a person or personality or actual force or presence. Let us see if we cannot find another word or term. In our modern metaphysics, we have the term mortal mind. Well, in its original connotation, that would have been probably the most wonderful one to use, because the term mortal mind, at least the way it's defined in Mrs. Eddy's writings, and she's the first one that defined it, is as nothingness. Mortal mind is a term denoting nothingness. Therefore, it wouldn't be a bad idea, whenever we behold any form of evil, to call it mortal mind, if only we could recognize that mortal mind means nothingness. But probably we can't, because metaphysics has set mortal mind up like the devil, as something to be protected against. And so we hear our modern metaphysicians doing protective work against mortal mind, nothingness. Paul gave us another term. He called it carnal mind. Of course, he made the mistake, too, that modern metaphysicians do, of fighting it. He said carnal mind is enmity against God, and it isn't. It isn't. I can prove that after 30 years' experience, that carnal mind isn't enmity against God. Carnal mind is the arm of flesh, or nothingness. It is a tempter that can tempt us to believe in a power apart from God, but it can't make it so any more than the devil could make Jesus fall for those temptations. No, carnal mind is a tempter. Carnal mind is a claim of two powers. Carnal mind is always presenting to us appearances of sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation, but they are no more than appearances. They are not reality. And so for our purpose, while we do use terms like devil, carnal mind, mortal mind, we do use terms like hypnotism or mesmerism. As a matter of fact, one of the best words is the most commonly used word in metaphysics, appearances. Just as the illusion on the desert is not a thing, an entity, it is an appearance, so the evils that present themselves to us are not actual, and they have no identity, and they have no substance, and they have no law. Therefore, we may look upon them as appearances. But each of you, in your own study, may discover a word or term that more nearly represents nothingness than any of these. Personally, these last few years, I think that nothingness has been more clearly revealed to me in the term arm of flesh. Hezekiah's term. They have only the arm of flesh. And remember, what he was talking about was an enemy at least twice as strong as his own forces, and yet he could disdainfully refer to them as the arm of flesh. The arm of flesh, nothingness. And to me, that term arm of flesh just about dissolves the appearances. The point that I would make is this. Error did not have its rise in you. It did not have its rise in your patience. It did not have its rise in wrong thinking. It did not have its rise in lust or animality or greed. It did not have its rise in hate or envy or jealousy. It had its rise in accepting the belief in two powers. That's where it had its rise, and it had its rise in billions of years ago, in the belief that there are two powers. It's a universal belief. No man invented it or discovered it. It is a universal belief which comes to us every minute of the day and night for acceptance or rejection. The belief in good and evil, the belief in two powers. Can you consistently declare God to be infinite, all power, and then ascribe power to something else and give it the power to cause disease or cause sin or cause lack? If you are to love God supremely, if you are to love God supremely, it can only be because you can accept God as the only power there is. How you can possibly love a God supremely that not only isn't the only power, but that isn't even strong enough to take care of the devil in all these thousands of years, I do not know. And I don't believe that anyone loves God supremely while believing in two powers, regardless of how much they may mouth their love for God. One can only love God in the realization of the supreme nature of God's being. That makes all evil of none power. Now, to understand the nature of God, then, as the only power, the all power, omnipotence. I wonder if you've sung hymns about omnipotence as many times as I have, and then gone out to fear mortal mind. Think of omnipotence as omnipotence, all power, omnipresence, here where I am, all power, here where I am. The very place whereon I stand is holy ground because of omnipotence, all power here. And then what of any other power? The arm of flesh, nothingness. Get thee behind me, Satan, lest I too accept two powers. Now, to accept the nature of God as supreme, having nothing to contend with, and no one to contend with, and no condition to contend with, abiding in the supremacy of God, in the supreme infinite nature of God's being, and then recognizing all of these appearances as the arm of flesh or nothing, a temptation to believe in two powers. Watch how they disappear. Watch how they evaporate. But they'll come back if you personalize. Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Once you know the impersonal nature of evil, you will not call a man a thief even if you see him stealing a wallet. You will know that you are witnessing only the impersonal evil of a belief in two powers, and you won't blame it on that individual. The first and greatest principle of the infinite way is to come into an understanding of the nature of God. When you do that, you're ready for the next step, to understand the impersonal nature of evil and its non-power. Then you are able to deal with discord in all of its phases. In our work, throughout the 30 years of healing work, I had the same problems to meet as all the rest of you practitioners, the same claims and everything else, but I found, and you may have found this too, that there are certain diseases that are not that do not readily yield. I found that there were some that were called blue babies and others that were called, what are they? Yes, the mongoloid babies. And I found there are children born physically and mentally handicapped, and many types of illness which do not respond to the ordinary metaphysical practice. What I want to tell you is this, that in more recent years I've had the opportunity of working with a few students and taking those cases for continued, you might call it, dedicated work, giving as many as 10, 12, 20, 30 treatments in a day over a period of 2 and 3 and 4 years. And I want you to know those cases can be broken too. If there is anything karmic about those cases, you can break the karma. But you'll have to work an awful lot harder at them than you will on the coughs and colds and flus and the things that people very readily want to give up and have the mentality to be able to give up. These cases that are called incurable, there is not a one of them that is incurable. Every one of them is curable if you are in a position to devote enough time and effort to it, because the same truth is true. These people are not responsible for their ills. If their ills are karmic, it hasn't anything to do with them, but it has to do with that universal karma, which is a belief in two powers. Therefore, if you are in a position to devote or dedicate that much time and effort to it, you can. But if not, learn how it's done and then teach the parents of these children how it's done, or the families, because actually in most of those cases it becomes the responsibility of the family to undertake that healing work, since you cannot expect any practitioner to devote their entire time for years and years and years to one or two or three patients. And it is for this reason that more and more the parents of the world have to learn to take care of that nature of claim within their own family. And again, not that the practitioner couldn't do it, but that the practitioners are not in a position to give over their lives to one or two or three patients, as we gave over 1 and 2 and 3 years to just a few cases, merely for the purpose of proving that it can be done. There's really nothing impossible once you understand the nature of God and really and truly know the nature of error as an impersonal nothingness. But oh, how we have to stand with it until we can demonstrate it. Again, remember, it isn't because evil is nothing that you can demonstrate it. It is only in proportion as you can attain the consciousness of its nothingness that you can demonstrate it. If the nothingness of evil would remove it, it would be removed by now, because it is nothing. But the nothingness won't remove it. It takes the enlightened consciousness of an individual. It takes the dedicated spiritual consciousness of an individual, and that's why you can only have so few healers in this age capable of doing the greater works. Anyone could do it if they could dedicate their lives to this work.